The BYU football program's world was understandably rocked earlier this week with Parker Kingston's arrest on suspicion of rape. And while it's not unprecedented territory for Kalani Sitake and company, doesn't make it any easier on the BYU Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insider, as your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and thank you to all of you who make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we talk about Parker Kingston and ahead of his first court appearance after being arrested on suspicion of rape, and what the BYU football program is going to have to do because it appears they'll be without their guy for the foreseeable future. Then we'll talk about Jimmer Fredette, the legend himself, going to be immortalized in the rafters in the Marriott Center tomorrow, and BYU takes on Colorado. We'll get into his legacy and obviously a little bit on BYU basketball and their matchup with the Buffs. And we'll finish up today's show with BYU baseball. Yeah, the round ball guys, they take to the diamond for the first time this season. What did Trent Pratt and company have in store for us? We'll get into all of that ahead on today's show. And it's all brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. We put the same drive into every single detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward segment. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, if you missed it earlier this week, Parker Kingston was arrested in St. George, Utah on suspicion of rape, and he makes his first court appearance later on today, scheduled, I believe, for sometime mid-afternoon down in St. George in 5th District Court in Utah. And while I stress once again that the legal system will have to play out here, that both sides will be heard, obviously there's going to be a whole lot coming on that front. The situation at hand here is that for the second straight offseason, the BYU football program is staring down one of their standout players, a guy that was expected to return for a senior campaign that very likely they could be without. Obviously, I'm referring last year to Jake Retzloff, who ultimately unenrolled from BYU, went to Tulane, and enjoyed a pretty marvelous senior campaign for the Green Wave by all accounts. But as things stand, assuming Parker Kingston in this legal situation plays out as long as it possibly could, BYU is likely to not have him for this upcoming season. And that would leave BYU without their top two wide receiver options from this past season. And in many respects, that was the vast majority of BYU's wide receiver production that would be unavailable. Obviously, Chase Roberts off to the NFL. Congratulations to him, by the way, on a side note, on being invited to the NFL Combine. Him and Jack Kelly, BYU standout linebacker, two representatives from BYU who will be working out with other NFL hopefuls in Indianapolis. But without Parker Kingston and without Chase Roberts, BYU's wide receiver position could be fairly brand new and untested. Now, I will also acknowledge this. In instances of adversity, this is exactly what that is for the BYU football program, there is opportunity as well. Guys like Jojo Phillips, he in particular will be expected to step up and be the leader of this unit in the absence of Chase Roberts, and very likely what I would assume, no matter how it feels like this plays out, outside of complete exoneration of Parker Kingston, I've got to think that BYU is going to be without Parker for, like I said, the foreseeable future. This legal situation could take quite a while to play out. So assuming that he is unavailable, Jojo Phillips has to step into the fray and lead this wide receiver unit. It's a wide receiver unit that's not devoid of talent. Let me be very clear as well on that front. It's just young and unproven. Cody Hagen, obviously, will see an uptick. He was already expecting to see an uptick in his rep distribution coming in to what would be his third season in BYU's program. Then you also look at some of the younger prospects. Reggie Frischknecht, while he is a transfer into the BYU football program, still relatively young in his college career. Tei Nakua, there are some people out there who believe that Tei may have the most natural talent of all of the Nakua brothers, and that includes, some guy by the name of Pula. So there is options on BYU's wide receiver depth chart, and that doesn't even include the freshman incoming Legend Glasker, the Pula twins. Either one of them could end up playing wide receiver. A lot of people think Jaron will end up at that spot. You also include Terrance Saryon in that mix, and there are going to be opportunities for BYU to have these guys step up and play a bigger role in the ultimate outcome of this upcoming season. Is it going to be easy? No. And in some ways, spring ball will be a proving ground for these young men to go out there and show what they're capable of. And I haven't mentioned all the different options on the roster here. There are a number of guys who are probably looking at the situation at hand saying, while it's unfortunate that obviously our teammate is going to have a horrendous legal matter to attend to, it opens the opportunity for these young men. I didn't even include the name of Tiger Bachmeier, and that's just a complete oversight on my part. Obviously, brother of BYU starting quarterback Bear Bachmeier. All of these guys that I've just mentioned there are going to have to shoulder the load here. Obviously, the tight end unit led by guys like Walker Lyons transferring in from USC. They will take on a bigger role in BYU's success as an offense. But don't misunderstand me trying to downplay the loss of Parker Kingston potentially for the BYU football program. It's going to be felt. I can't say anything other than it will have a pronounced impact on BYU's offense. But much like they did a season ago, all you can do if you're Kalani Sitake, Aaron Roderick, Fesi Sitake, the brain trust that comprises BYU's offensive game plan, is you have to find what you have to go out, look at what you have on your roster, maybe see if there's an option or two in the transfer portal still remaining, and make do with what you've got. It's unfortunate. It's sad. It's gut-wrenching. Honestly, like allegations like this just make me sick to my stomach. And I broke it down in terms of what we know earlier this week. For those of you who are everydayers, if you didn't catch that, you can go back and find it on the podcast feed. And we'll likely learn more in his initial court appearance coming up later today. Maybe it's already happened by the time some of you listen and or watch this. But it's a horrific situation. There are literally no winners in that deal. Anybody, Parker, the alleged victim in this circumstance, BYU, nobody wins in this circumstance. Nobody really won in the Jake Retzloff circumstance last year. It has a net negative impact on all parties, and it's unfortunate. The hope is that at some point, everybody can move forward with their life, but understand that if what has been alleged here was perpetrated, man, it's not a good look. It's a PR nightmare. It's a second straight off season. The BYU has been rocked by scandal and involving allegations of sexual assault. Yeah, there's a whole lot out there that is going to have to be sorted out in due time. But going back to the original premise of this conversation is that the BYU football program, while it's not unprecedented territory because it's the second straight offseason, they have dealt with something of this variety. What they have to do is they've got to move forward. They have to love up their brother, speaking of Parker, and support him as much as they possibly can, but understand that they, as a unit, wide receivers and beyond, BYU's offense and the team, speaking of the program overall, they have to coalesce around themselves and carry on doing what they do. All right, coming up next, we are going to be privy to the immortalization of the man, the myth, the Jimmer. He is going to have his jersey hung in the rafters of the Marriott Center. What is the legacy of one of the greatest players in BYU basketball history? Well, I think it's kind of it goes better left unsaid. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. Thank you for being here on Locked On Cougars and making it a part of your day. Please continue to subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with your family and friends. And if you are what we call an everydayer, if you want to take it to the next level, show that commitment and become a member of the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. Get insider access to our text service that gives you updates that are coming from myself on all things BYU. If you want to get audio ad-free episodes, you want access to Locked On merch or a bevy of other options out there, go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com or click the link in the show notes below. All right, coming up tomorrow afternoon, Jimmer Fredette is going to be center court at the Marriott Center, and obviously being just loudly applauded for all that he accomplished in a BYU uniform, as the BYU basketball program and Brigham Young University are going to retire his jersey and hang it in the rafters of the Marriott Center. It's incredible to think that we are 15 years removed from one of the greatest single seasons in college basketball history and in BYU basketball history. I was an intern working with Greg Wrubell his senior year, speaking of Jimmer Fredette. Those of you who are everydayers know that about me. And getting a firsthand look kind of behind the scenes at how crazy things got on the media side of things when it came to the Jimmer era, man, teach me how to Jimmer is right. It was absolutely insanity. And I am, for one, going to be looking forward to seeing that number 32 jersey hanging in the rafters at the Marriott Center. It's been unofficially, speaking of that number, unofficially retired for the better part of a decade and a half since he ended his career at BYU. Have you noticed anybody else wear number 32 since then? I hadn't either. But it is official now. He will have his number retired, his jersey, and he will be immortalized in BYU basketball history and BYU athletics history, and for good reason, because this is a guy who put together one of just the most seminal seasons that I can ever remember of any athlete. When you have people like Kevin Durant, remember his famous tweet, Jimmer is the best scorer in the world when he was doing his thing at BYU. It showed just because there's athletes who obviously attain major levels of fame, but there are athletes who transcend sports and enter true pop culture. And it's not very often that BYU has had one of those athletes, and that was Jimmer Fredette. Jimmer Fredette surpassed college basketball. He surpassed just basketball in general. He became a cultural phenomenon his senior year. And thinking back on it, it was an incredibly fun time in BYU basketball history. Now, does it have the ending that I think any of you or I would have liked to have had? No, the Brandon Davies situation obviously precluded what could have been a Final Four team that senior year, but it does not take away anything of what Jimmer accomplished, and he rightfully will see his jersey ascending into the rafters at the Marriott Center tomorrow afternoon. Now, I am very sad to say that I will not be there for it. Yours truly, I am going to be about 6.5 hours by car south in Las Vegas. I've got a daughter who's got a cheer competition that I am attending this weekend, but I will be tuned in and watching it all play out as much as I possibly can. And man, what just incredible memories have come flooding back the more I think about Jimmer and what he accomplished. That audio cut out there, it looks like. So I think we're back, but I've told the story before. After Jimmer Fredette went off against the University of Utah up at the Huntsman Center, I had finished my radio shift, and I went out to meet some friends at the Pi, the underground location, like the OG, the Pi location right next to the University of Utah campus. And we walked in, ordered our food, and my good friend Colton decided when they asked, well, what name do you want to put on it? And he said, Jimmer. And the guy who was wearing Utah gear looked him dead in the eye and said, there is no bleeping way I'm saying that name. It just, like, memories like that. There's fun memories, but everything that Jimmer accomplished, some of the performances that he put on, and almost single-handedly carrying the BYU basketball program to heights they have very rarely been to before and since. In fact, we've got 3 Sweet 16 appearances in program history in the past 40 some odd years, and Jimmer has one of them. Just incredible stuff, what he accomplished and what he did. So looking forward to seeing his jersey hoisted into the rafters. The other thing is, though, that the BYU men's basketball program needs to generate some momentum with this. Now, Colorado's coming in on the heels of what their head coach, Tad Boyle, called, and I apologize for the swearing here, an old-fashioned ass whooping. That was the direct term he used in their aftermath of Colorado getting demolished by Texas Tech earlier this week. Colorado's near the bottom of the Big 12 standings, and BYU coming off a much-needed win at Baylor. They need to pick up some momentum here and do it by beating Colorado. I'd like to see improvement on defense. I'd like to see improvement in rebound. I'd like to just see better cohesive play across the roster from the BYU men's basketball program. But the biggest thing is beat Colorado and pick up your second straight win and get back on a winning path. It sets up an incredibly difficult week next week because you have the likes of Arizona and Iowa State on the horizon, and you can ill afford, if you're AJ DeBonsa, Richie Saunders, Rob Wright, Kevin Young, on down the list of the members of the BYU basketball program, to be thinking about those games and take your eye off this one. Every team in the Big 12, and I don't care how lowly or how high they are in the standings, is capable of putting on a run here. And Colorado, based on the comments that Tad Boyle had to say about his team after the fact, he talked about the fact that we have wasted the university's money. We shouldn't be flying a charter plane because they played down in Lubbock. We wasted money doing this. We should have to essentially hitchhike our way home to Boulder. Well, you can guarantee he's lit into his team because he did that in the post-game press conference. It's probably only gotten worse behind closed doors. And they're going to be motivated to get back into the win column and do it at the expense of BYU. Jimmer Fredette doesn't want to see the program that he once upon a time called home lose to the likes of the Colorado Buffaloes. And I don't expect BYU basketball to lose that game either, but you cannot overlook Colorado and thinking, okay, this is an also-ran in this league. Y'all thought that Oklahoma State might have been an also-ran. You may have thought that Baylor was ripe for the picking, but, well, one of those you lost, speaking of Oklahoma State, and you grinded out a really just tight win over Baylor earlier this week. BYU basketball is not in a position where they can afford to overlook anybody at this juncture. They have got some very, very difficult matchups on the horizon, but every one of them counts as a win if you can get it. And considering they just endured a 4-game losing streak, you don't want to see all of a sudden that now they've lost 6 of their last 8 and 4 of their last 5. That would be really, really a bad look, especially on a day when one of the all-timers in program history is going to have his jersey retired. So I look forward to seeing how it all plays out. 2:00 tip-off. Obviously, Jimmer will be there. There will be a lot of applause, a lot of adulation coming his way. But at the same time, the BYU men's basketball program, they got to go out there and show that they can match the intensity, just match the moment of watching Jimmer Fredette have his jersey retired and make sure they put on a performance that all Cougar fans are going to appreciate and understand that they're playing for more than just themselves right now. They're playing for perception. They're playing for alumni. They're playing for one of the GOATs in program history. But biggest thing is find a way to get a W and start to generate some momentum down the stretch here. If you want to have the type of run that BYU had last year, well, that game against Baylor was last year's West Virginia. And now, can you reel off 8, 9, 10 wins in a row? We'll all find out, but it starts with this game against the Colorado Buffaloes. All right, coming up next, we are going to talk about BYU baseball. Yeah, the round ball boys, the Cougar Cagers, the Batcats, excuse me, as some like to call them. They take to the diamond for the first time this season. They're in Kentucky to take on the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. What do Trent Pratt and program have in store for us this season? Well, hopefully a lot better than what the Big 12 thinks they're going to do. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. Now, Mazda's here for you guys in terms of taking care of you, talking about all the different things going on as moving the game forward, though. For those who show there's more to the score than just what's on screen. And talking about who stood out this week, I got to give a shout out to AJ DeBonsa. AJ has been everything, and I've talked about him on the podcast earlier this week. Everything he's accomplished all year long has been incredible. A 36-point performance that with all the stats, 70+% shooting percentage, 5+ assists and rebounds, everything accomplished against Baylor on Tuesday night was something that 30 years plus has not happened in college or NBA basketball. It shows you that this young man has got everything within him. And that's what reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving that extra fire, that grit, and the I never quit attitude. Because speaking of Mazda, they put that same passion into every model that they create. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there is what counts. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Woodward. Now, expecting some weather here in the greater Salt Lake Valley. We're just going to say it. The fun per foot ratio at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes from Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning and radically fun and safe environment with facilities for all abilities. The door is always open to first-timers and regulars alike. Bounce from park to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. And they have their Mountain Park season passes that are still on sale. Rip hot laps with a posse after school and into the evening. Maximize mountain time this winter. One of the best terrain parks in Utah all season long. And if you're looking to go all in, they also have their all-access memberships that provide just that. From passes to perks, discounts, and more. It's year-round fun from our friends over at Woodward. Just starting out, learn to fly with the Woodward Tribe and seasonal multi-week programs that build your skills and confidence in a stoke-inspiring environment. In just 20 minutes from Salt Lake, Woodward Park City offers experiential learning with facilities for all abilities. Learn more now at woodwardparkcity.com. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars. Dealing with a mic issue today. Keeps deciding it wants to turn itself off. But thank you, as always, for making Locked On Cougars a part of your day. Making it, in fact, your first listen of the day. And appreciate all of you for joining us every single day here on the podcast. But the BYU baseball program is in Western Kentucky, or at Western Kentucky this weekend as they open up the 2026 baseball season. Now, some of you are thinking, hey, it's February, Jake. What's going on? But this is when baseball gets going. And Trent Pratt and company, they are looking to take a step forward, a positive step forward for the BYU baseball program. I'll reiterate a point I have made here for years on this podcast, is that when BYU joined the Big 12 still dealing with a mic issue. Apologies. It was my perception when BYU joined the Big 12 conference that there were two programs that were going to be most negatively impacted by the move to the Big 12. And those were the two teams that play on dirt, speaking of baseball and softball. Now, the reason why is because while the West Coast Conference features pretty good baseball and obviously solid softball, the Big 12, well, it features that at an even higher level because it's the Power 4 level. We're talking that this league, speaking of the Big 12, has got programs that annually contend for regionals, super regionals, if not the men's and women's college World Series. That's the type of stuff that you can accomplish in this league. And being a cold weather school without facilities and a capability of playing year round, that obviously was going to put BYU baseball at a disadvantage. I have got to give BYU administration credit. They went about and put a heated field in the confines of Miller Park, which has allowed the baseball program to practice when it's been much colder than they would have been able to do otherwise, especially when there's been weather. Now, this winter has been a little different because BYU's been able to be outside a lot. A lot of us have been able to be outside a lot because there's just been very little weather in terms of snow and rain here along the Wasatch Front. This week's been a little bit different, but the baseball program has been picked near the bottom of the Big 12 conference once again this year. And Trent Pratt and company, they have their work cut out for them because they have to go out and they've got to kind of fight their way up the standings here. Now, I thought the fact that they put together the fight they did to make the Big 12 tournament last year down there at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, and then winning a game down there in Arlington, that was positive signs for Trent Pratt and company. That was really cool to see them go out there and show what they were capable of to all of us. But we need to see more of that consistency. It can't be a mad dash in the final weeks of the season just to scrape in and get into that tournament, even though it was fun to watch them make some noise in the Big 12 tournament. It starts today. You face off against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers in a 4-game set, and it's a big opportunity. They will play a doubleheader today, speaking of BYU and WKU, 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Mountain Time. They'll play again on tomorrow afternoon at noon, and then on Monday to wrap up the series. And it is a big opportunity for the Cougars to get the season off on a positive note. I'm very curious to see if they really can take that proverbial next step and maybe find themselves mid-table this year in the Big 12 Conference. I don't think that's asking too much of this program, because I think that that's what they aspire to do. I don't think they're under any illusions that they're going to make a magical run a la Arizona State in Big 12 football 2 years ago and go from worst to first. I'd be hard pressed to pick that for anybody, because it's just ludicrous to think of how crazy it was. But don't finish moored at the bottom of the Big 12 conference this season. That would be a bad look for BYU baseball. I would like to see BYU baseball get more love than it's getting. And that's partially on me as a guy who talks about BYU sports for a living. I need to be better about promoting what BYU baseball is doing and talk about Trent Pratt and talk about whatever successes they may have this year. And I hope that they give me a reason to talk more about them. That would be a phenomenal thing. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they do, but understand that they are starting from the bottom. And they have got to essentially earn the respect of the rest of the league. This is a very difficult baseball league. It's not the top tier in terms of collegiate baseball. That would probably belong to the SEC with the programs that it boasts, among others, ACC also. But the Big 12, it's got a lot of good teams. Texas Tech, TCU, you can go down the list. These warmer weather schools, the ones from the southerly climes, they're typically, leading this league. And you have to earn the respect of those programs out there. And some of you, and you know who you are. We've had conversations. Those of you who are more baseball inclined, I've literally sat down with multiple BYU alumni who have talked about what they want to see from BYU baseball. Well, the one thing that can really, I think, change the perception for BYU baseball and maybe get some of its kind of facilities and just investment in the program that some want it to have. Well, what will help do that is winning. And you don't have to win at an astronomical clip. Like I said, you don't need to be winning the Big 12 this year to get that investment. But if you can show, speaking of Coach Pratt and company, just steady improvement, showing that last year, the final stanza of the season, when you did make that Big 12 tournament, I think you beat Arizona State, if I recall correctly, down there in Arlington. That was a phenomenal thing. But show that you can kind of carry that consistency throughout this year. You're not going to win every game. Baseball is just set up that you're going to lose. It's just part of the game. But let's see a program that goes out there, plays their rear ends off, and shows that, this cold weather school that has one of the most incredible backdrops in all of collegiate baseball and maybe in baseball in general, let's show that they've got more than just a cool backdrop. Let's see a team that is capable of winning games. And should that happen, I'm going to be talking about it. Others will be talking about it. It's kind of funny that to the victors go the spoils. And what that means is if you win, people want to talk about you. People want to talk about what you're doing right. When you lose, people don't really want to talk about it. And I'll do my best. I can assure you, doing what I do here on this podcast, I do have enough inventory that I can spend some time this spring digging a little more deeper into BYU baseball and talking about successes on the field. But we're also, if they fall flat on their face, we'll talk about that as well. The hope is it all goes well. And I hope that they can show that even though I thought they were maybe at the biggest disadvantage of all of the athletic programs at BYU going in to the Big 12 conference, let's see if they can overcome that and show us that, hey, while we may be a cold weather school, we're capable of competing with the big boys and showing what we are capable of. I'd love to see it. All right, we'll wrap it up there. As always, thank you for all of your support. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy it if you're going out to watch Jimmer Fredette being honored at the Marriott Center tomorrow afternoon. Of course, I'll try to fit in a postcast or something, maybe, or just a short recap of a reel or something like amidst all of the hoopla going on with my cheer competition in Las Vegas. But we'll have a full edition back for you guys early next week, obviously detailing everything going on in BYU sports as we always do. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you're on video now, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And if you're listening on audio, go make your second listen. Our friends over at Locked On College Football. I have made a couple appearances of late with our good friend Spencer McLaughlin, so check that out as well. And as always, come back and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.